Welcome to the Right Take Podcast, news, ideas, and conversations at the intersection of politics and culture, a project of the David Horowitz Freedom Center. I will be your host, Mark Tapson. Welcome back to the Right Take Podcast. I am your host, Mark Tapson. Thanks very much for joining me here at the intersection of politics and culture. I just finished reading a book whose author is my guest today, and in the book he used a phrase that really hit the nail on the head about our current cultural slow-motion collapse. The phrase is the mainstreaming of madness. That is a tragically accurate description of what we see going on around us every day and what we read about in the news. To drive that point home, let me just read a couple of headlines from today's news that highlight a concerning, to say the least, degradation of society. A degradation, I might add, that's not just the result of typical civilizational entropy, the natural decay of a civilization that's lost its animating spirit, but of an intentional subversion of society by a political movement of the left called cultural Marxism, which I've talked and written about many times. Here's one headline: Pandora's box of polyamory child marriages possible under proposed California amendment. That refers to a pro-family California organization warning that a proposed state constitutional amendment to eliminate the traditional definition of marriage from state law could lead to the legitimization of polyamorous, incestuous, and child marriages. Okay, here's another story in the news. A man who thinks he's a woman is still on the run after allegedly murdering two people. The police and the media are referring to him as a woman and using she/her pronouns. And how about a third news story from today for good measure? UK climate activists have sprayed the ancient Stonehenge monument with some kind of bright orange powder, demanding an end to fossil fuels. Now, no one has ever accused climate activists of being mentally stable, but this kind of unhinged activism has become par for the course for the left, which has collectively lost its mind. And yes, that is in the UK, not America, but that story just demonstrates that the problem is not merely American, but civilizational. The mainstreaming of madness, indeed. These kinds of culture war headlines have become normalized amid what any sane person would have to acknowledge is a civilizational breakdown, or let's call it a cultural meltdown, which just happens to be, by pure coincidence, the title of my upcoming guest's brand new book. So stay tuned. You don't want to miss this conversation. And let me say, as always, please take a moment to subscribe to The Right Take if you haven't already, so that you can keep up with the conversations we are having here with important thinkers, writers, pundits, scholars, and storytellers. And if you like what you hear, a positive review would be greatly appreciated. Thank you, and don't touch that dial. My guest today at The Right Take is the president and CEO of the Catholic League, the nation's largest Catholic civil rights organization. He's a longtime educator and the best-selling author of about a dozen books like War on Virtue, and now his latest book, Cultural Meltdown, The Secular Roots of Our Moral Crisis, which we are going to talk about today. He's actually been a guest a couple of times before at The Right Take, and I love having him on because he is a straight-shooting, hardcore warrior, and we need more like him. Bill Donohue, welcome back to the Right Take Podcast.
Well, thank you so much for having me, Mark.
Bill, before we dive into your book, I want to ask you about a couple of your recent editorials. I subscribe to those, so I keep up with your take on the issues. First, this week you published a letter that you wrote to Representative James Comer, the chairman of the Committee on Oversight and Accountability, explaining why you want the FBI to authorize the release of the so-called Nashville Manifesto that was kept by mass murderer Audrey Hale. Listeners, you may remember that back in March 2023, the 28-year-old female Hale, who identified as a male, massacred 3 children and 3 adults at a Christian school, and that her manifesto has not been publicly released since then. Why did you write that letter, Bill?
I wrote the letter because the police chief at that time said that there was reason to believe that what she did with this mass murder was really a function of an animus against Christianity. She was not happy with the school where she went, Covenant School. That's the school that she attacked. fact that her parents were practicing Christians. And what I want to know is this. I want to find out what's going on in the transgender community. We know that the violence that is being committed against them, we've done that work here at the Catholic League, is done mostly by themselves. This has been ill-reported, and I have to say willfully by the mainstream media. But what I'm interested in is this. I've read enough material about the transgender community, and in fact, in my recent book, I have a whole chapter on this. There is an animus against the Judeo-Christian ethos, and if it's deep-seated, then we need to know. I mean, if some group of white racists are out against black Americans, we need to know what's motivating these white racists and try to stomp that out. There's been a cover-up by the government, by the FBI, and to a large extent by the media. They don't want us to know the truth about this manifesto, this journal, that this girl who thought mistakenly that she was a boy, we want to find out and get to the bottom of this. And I hope that Comer will ask the FBI to appear before them and explain why is there an apparent cover-up.
Yeah, this whole movement, as I would call it, of transgenderism, it's seemingly overnight become a kind of a dominant flashpoint in the culture war. As you mentioned, you do have a chapter in the book on it. What is driving this astronomical spike in transgenderism?
Basically, what it comes down to is a rejection of God and nature. As Jefferson talked about, we must respect nature and nature's God. The secular left doesn't respect either. They believe there's no such thing as human nature. We're malleable. We can be treated like putty. We can get rid of whatever sins we may have had. And if we get the right people there, always the left, of course, in charge of the command centers, we can reshape human nature and reshape society. And of course, these people are too smart to believe in God. God doesn't exist. They're really the godlike type people. And, if you believe that, and if you believe in this idea of postmodernism, which essentially denies truth, it thinks that truth is a fiction. Once you believe that truth is a fiction, yes, it is possible for you to believe the idea that a man can think he's a woman can think she's a man. The fact of the matter is that most Americans do not believe this, but the elites do. The people at the top, the decision makers, they're the ones who think that we can change our sex. You can't change your sex. And as I point out in the book, our gender, which they misinterpret, our gender is what we've learned from society, what's appropriate roles for boys and girls. It's really your sex is what they're talking about. Your sex is not assigned by anybody. Your sex is determined by your father. But you see, they constantly are at war with Biology 101, and they are the anti-science people, and our side needs to tag them as that. It's not practicing Catholics and Jews and Muslims and others who are anti-science. It's the secularists who deny the existence of chromosomes and how much they affect our behavior.
Yeah, I definitely want to pursue that some more. But before I forget, I want to back up and ask you a quick question about another editorial that you wrote this week, just yesterday, I think, in fact, an editorial in which you discussed the results of a Pew Research Center poll, highlighting the differences between Biden supporters and Trump supporters. And one of the statements on that poll reads, quote, "Society is better off if people make marriage and having children a priority," unquote. Now, 59% of Trump supporters agree with that statement, which I actually find kind of disturbingly low, but only 19% of Biden supporters agree. That is a stunningly small percentage. Why do you think that more than 80% of Biden supporters disagree that society is better off if people make marriage and children a priority?
I think because of radical autonomy, radical individualism. They're caught up with themselves. They want to have all the sexual free-for-alls they want to have, and they don't want the diseases that come with them, and they don't want the babies that come with them. Then you've got a large segment of the gay population who feels the same way. They look at marriage as if it's some kind of patriarchal invention. Women throughout history have embraced their traditional roles. They weren't oppressed. They didn't regard them that this is all made up by modernists, beginning in the Enlightenment in the last few hundred years. But throughout history, that was never the case. But no, we have a strong strain of narcissism within the secular community. That's not a matter of opinion. If you take a look at the data, Pew Research, Gallup, and the others on this, it comes true over and over again. So marriage and the family are regarded to them as anathema. It's an antiquated institution. We should be free to make up our own idea of right and wrong and how we conduct ourselves in matters sexual.
Okay, let me dive a little more deeply into your new book, Cultural Meltdown, which I just finished reading. The basic premise of it, which I could not agree with more, is that our nation is just critically divided by two incompatible worldviews. Could you elaborate a little on that?
Right. It's approximately 50-50 in this country. About half the country still believes in the Judeo-Christian ethos. We believe in God. We believe in truth. We believe in human nature. We believe in moral absolutes. We believe that there are limitations to the human condition, that we can't have perfection here on earth. Then the other half of our society says, no, God doesn't exist. Truth is a fiction. Human nature doesn't exist. Moral relativism is the right way to proceed. And yes, of course, we can create perfection here on earth if we just listen to the right people. Now, these are two positively irreconcilable visions of man and society. At some point, one side will eclipse the other. And I am saying to the listeners here, if the other side wins, we're done. I mean, quite frankly, we can't continue like this. The idea that there's no such thing as truth, the idea that we can create perfection here on earth, every time they've tried it, it's led to nothing but body bags and bloodshed.
As I said a moment ago, I could not agree more with that assessment. And I wrote an article recently, in fact, in which I argued that this division, like you just pointed out, is irreconcilable. One side or the other has to prevail, and even at the cost maybe of a hot civil war. Where is this national division of ours headed? And is there a way forward that does not leave the country crippled?
Well, yes. And let me be very explicit. The problem in our country, by and large, is not the average American man or woman. The problem is the elites, the ruling class. They're the ones who have gone off the reservation. They're the ones who believe all this nonsense that we've been talking about. And if we're going to change in society, we have to get to the elites. In other words, the progress has to begin at the bottom and to correct the ones at the top. Now, to some extent, this is happening. I'll give you one quick example. I mean, the whole transgender idea, the Europeans are way ahead of us. They thought at one time, for the last several decades, that yes, you could change your sex. Now they realize it's impossible. You can't do it. It's led to all kinds of physiological and psychological problems. So who's lagging? The United States and Canada. We're in last place. But eventually, given all the lawsuits now that are being filed against therapists and doctors and hospitals, institutions, because they've ruined these young girls. It's 80% of the ones who transition are girls wanting to be boys, not the other way around. Now, is it ever too late? Not really. But some of these people now are suing them. And so if enough people get sued for what they're doing, which when you're dealing with minors, Mark, when you're dealing with minors, this is child abuse. You know, if a guy walked into a doctor into a hospital and said, listen, doc, I want you to cut off my left leg. He'd say, excuse me, you don't walk into my hospital here and I'm going to amputate your leg. We don't do that. But what if he came in and said, listen, I'm not happy being a boy. I know I'm really a girl and I want you to cut off my genitals. Oh, go down there to room 12C. I'll be down there in 20 minutes. I mean, this is just how crazy it is. Again, the average person knows better. And this is interesting, too. I spent a good deal of my life as a professor. They're some of the nuttiest people I ever met in my life. In all of the survey data, blacks are the least likely to believe that you can change your sex. White people with higher education, with postgraduate degrees, are the most likely. So the question posed itself, why are white people so stupid and why are black people so smart? It has a lot to do with that, proportionally speaking, more whites have been poisoned in the colleges and universities with all this nonsense. I mean, everybody has common sense, knows that you can't change these things. By the way, I want to make one thing here that the listeners were going to love. If you've read the book, you know what I'm talking about. In a chapter on postmodernism, I talk about a philosopher by the name of Laurie Calhoun. Now, she believes that truth is a fiction. She was asked by another philosopher who has had his head screwed on straight, David Detmer, I got to ask you a question. Are giraffes taller than ants? And her answer was, no, that's a matter of religious faith. See, we need to build more asylums and move half of these people in the academy over there. I mean, I'm being facetious to some extent, but I'll tell you the truth. A preschool kid would be able to give you the correct answer. That's why I say these people have been poisoned by higher education.
Yeah, I'm reminded of that quote about how there is no idea so stupid or crazy that an intellectual won't embrace it and promote it. Bill, in the book, you use this great phrase, the mainstreaming of madness, which you can clearly see everywhere in the culture today. What's the importance of natural law and reason in guiding a society?
Natural law is the recognition, beginning with Aristotle, by the way, and the Catholic Church helped perfect it with Aquinas and Augustine. But it's the idea that everybody in his heart of hearts knows that there are some things which are simply indefensible and are morally wrong. Now, of course, to the secularists today, they say, no, that's not true. That morality is a matter of opinion. Now, let's fast forward to what happened after World War II, to Nuremberg, all right? They put the Nazi generals and the troopers on trial, and they said, we're going to what you did to Jews and putting them into the ovens, this cannot be countenanced. And their answer was, I was only following orders, which is a true answer, but they were convicted anyway. Now, how do you convict people when they're following orders? Because in the law, under the Nazis, it was okay to mass murder. The only way they could convict them was by invoking natural law. They didn't use the term, although some of the people, the partisans did. They're basically saying, listen, in your heart of hearts, that's what natural law is. You know there are some things which are simply morally wrong. And it is on that basis that you have to be convicted. Because if it's a matter of opinion, then I might believe in slavery. You may not believe in slavery. You keep your opinions to yourself, sir, because if you don't want to own one, that's your business. But it's not your business to stop me from owning one. Once you go down that line, the powerless in our society, the most vulnerable, are the biggest losers.
Bill, bound up together with this moral relativism that you were talking about and that's afflicting our society today is this multiculturalist perspective, which views all cultures and civilizations as morally equal and worthy, except, of course, for Western civilization, which is seen as uniquely evil in world history, uniquely exploitative of other cultures, uniquely racist. Is there any truth to the multiculturalist perspective? And what damage is being done in the name of this sort of selective tolerance and even celebration of other cultures at the expense of our own?
Well, Arthur Schlesinger Jr. was a great historian, and he saw right through this. So did Pope Benedict XVI. It sounds nice. We should respect other cultures and the like. Okay, fine. Don't go too far with that itself. Even that's problematic. Because as I said to students at Carnegie Mellon University back in the 1990s, when I gave a speech, after it was over, two students came to me. They were PhD students in engineering. They said, you really like this country, don't you? I said, yeah, you're right. I'm a veteran. I love America. And they just kind of smirked at me. I said, wait a minute, hold on now. I think I know where you're coming from. You have this multicultural idea that all cultures are equal. I said, that's right. So one is not better than another. That's correct. They're all morally equal. There's no hierarchy. I said, I think I understand what you mean. So let me just test you right now. In other words, in this country, we put pizza into ovens, and in Nazi Germany, they put Jews into ovens. That's a matter of different strokes for different folks. Is that right? And they got nervous. They said, no. I said, no, excuse me. That is a logical conclusion from your premise. And if you feel uncomfortable about that, then you better rethink it. Look, multiculturalism is a whip. It's a tool. It's a weapon to beat down Western civilization, the only civilization which has given us freedom, equality, and prosperity. So if you don't want Western civ, okay, are you going to recommend some other civilization? Well, who the hell is it? I mean, this is madness. And multiculturalism is designed to divide us. That's what the left wants. Divide and conquer. The Romans understood it, and we're doing the same thing today.
Bill, you quote the historian Will Durant as saying something to the effect of no civilization being able to sustain itself without the aid of religion. And that reminds me of a quote from the great Russian dissident Alexander Solzhenitsyn, who once said that all of the terrible things that had befallen his country since the communist revolution in 1917 came about because man had forgotten God. Is that happening in America today?
It is. And, Solzhenitsyn, let me pick up on that, because he warned us that the greatest threat is freedom of conscience. That's really freedom of religion. And this is what's going on today. Thought control. We're punishing people. They just punished a student, a young student. I forget what state it was, because he used the word illegal alien in the classroom. The Biden administration has a whole list of words that you have to use. And if you, quote, misgender somebody, you will be punished. The Associated Press and Google have put out mountains of evidence not evidence, but of reports of what kind of language you must use. This is the groupthink that Orwell was fearful of, and before him, Huxley, back in the 1930s. The Biden administration has embraced it. They want you to line up single file. And Solzhenitsyn was right, because the most private part of your existence is your conscience, which is inextricably related to freedom of religion. And that's what they want to do. Kill religion and kill your conscience so you can just march off and do what you're told to do.
Bill, even though the left has very successfully marginalized Christians culturally and politically in this country, they constantly hype this specter of a Christian theocracy taking over the country and turning it into a fundamentalist Handmaid's Tale dystopia. Part of their current agenda seems to be fear-mongering about the threat to democracy of a fascistic Christian nationalism. That's become the boogeyman phrase. Is Christian nationalism a movement to be feared?
No, what's need to be feared are people like Andrew Whitehead and these others, and Robert P. Jones and these people who are trying to use this as a weapon. I've examined what they say is Christian nationalism. You know what it means? If you believe in the Pledge of Allegiance and things of that nature, you believe the United States is the greatest country in the world, somehow you're a threat to society. They're inventing a boogeyman so they can slap you down. Back in the 70s and 80s, they called it a theocracy and the like. They always want to do that. Now, admittedly, I'll be the first one to say, are there a few handful of nutty Christians out there who would like to have a theocracy? No doubt there are. But the real problem is not a few nutty Christians who have no power. The real problem is in the university. These guys like Whitehead and others, these are sociologists. I'm a sociologist myself. I've read what they've actually said. It's based on nothing. They're just creating this. The real fear is not Christian nationalists. It's the ones who want you to believe that they're a problem.
In the book, you have a chapter called The Root Cause of Our Discontent. You've already touched on this a little bit, and I don't want you to have to give away any spoilers, but what is the root cause of discontent in a secularist culture?
Well, we believe, all of us, that there is an American creed. We believe in liberty and equality for all. Now, is it perfect? Do we have a perfect society? No. Will we ever? No. But we have something to aspire to. Now, when I was teaching courses in social problems to students, I would point out that, yes, compared to the blackboard, which is, in other words, utopia, the ideal, this is right out of the Enlightenment, then we fail. But, the real world is based on, have we made progress on the basis of race, sex, class? Are women and blacks, for example, and the poor better off now in the United States than they were 50, 100, 200 years ago? What about comparing women and race and class to other countries around the world today? How do we stack up against Latin America? How do we stack up against Africa and the Middle East and the Muslim-run nations and Asia? How do we stack up? Now, once you have a realistic understanding, you can still embrace the American creed. But what the left does is say, here's what we shout about, liberty and equality, and they point out the blemishes. Yes, we have blemishes, but there's a reason why people keep busting into the country, isn't there? They're not busting into North Korea. Right? They didn't jump the wall from West Germany into East Germany, did they? Why are they coming in from the north? Why are they coming from the south? Why are they coming from all over the world? To experience oppression on the part of the Christian nationalists? I mean, these people should be taken off to Bellevue Hospital and treated.
Bill, I always say that the culture war is actually a civilizational war because that's really what's at stake. Is it also something even bigger than that, namely a spiritual war?
It is. Because at the end of the day, you have to account for, why am I here? You have to ask the ontological questions. Why am I here? What is my purpose? What is the purpose of man in society? And at some point, if you don't want to believe in God, then what are you going to believe in? Yourself. That's not a prescription that a society can exist. We have succeeded in the Western world, the Judeo-Christian ethos. We're the ones that gave the world the idea of rule by law. We're the ones who gave the idea, we got it from the Jews, the idea of fidelity between a man and a woman. Before that, that was not the case. We're the ones who gave prosperity. We're the ones who had the economic revolution and the industrial revolution. We're the ones who have freedom, equality, and rule by law. So if you want to do away with that, what exactly are you going to recommend to take the place? There isn't anything. They keep falling back on themselves because the secularists regard the three most dreaded words in the English language are thou shalt not. No, nobody will tell me what to do, except, of course, during COVID. And then you put on your bloody mask and I will go marching off to the classroom. I mean, like sheep. They accepted what the government said when it came to that. But don't tell them what to do and bet them what to do. That'll be a problem.
Bill, I had a friend recently try to tell me that younger generations are falling away from the church today because the church is not getting on board with the LGBTQ agenda. Isn't it actually the opposite of that too many Christian denominations think they need to embrace that agenda to stay relevant and to attract young people, and that what many young people actually crave is a church that's grounded in traditional principles and doesn't just sway with every cultural breeze that blows?
Well, let me just prove you right now. Just a few weeks ago, the Methodists took a vote and they decided they're going to have openly gay people as ministers. Guess what happened in 1 week? They lost 1 million people. That's not an opinion. So you're absolutely right, Mark. If you take a look at the religions which have become the most modern, okay, within the Catholic Church, you've got a lot of these orders of priests and dioceses. They're very modern, very relevant. Who's going into those orders? Nobody. The most liberal nun orders, no young woman is going into them at all whatsoever. You've got the same thing in the Jewish community. The Orthodox are not having a problem getting people to join. The evangelicals are holding their own in the Protestant community. It's the mainstream denominations within the Protestant community, the Episcopalians and the Presbyterians and the Methodists, the Lutherans. They're the ones who become so relevant that they become irrelevant. People want something to believe in. They want something they can fixate on. If you're just going to have this, if you're teaching in Sunday in church, the same thing that you can find in the editorial pages of the Washington Post and the New York Times, I guess you don't need to go there anymore.
Bill, last year you starred in and you were co-executive producer of an award-winning documentary about Disney that was called Walt's Disenchanted Kingdom, which you and I talked about actually on a previous episode. Do you foresee doing more sort of culture war documentaries like that?
Well, I don't know if we can. They're very expensive to do. I'm delighted with the results of this because we certainly have had some effect in creating a discussion in high-ranking places within the Disney company about what the direction should be. I'm not saying we won't do any. It's a big operation to do, and we don't have a big staff, and we have a lot of things that I do in terms of writing and speaking engagements and stuff like that. But yeah, we're certainly not off the table.
Excellent. Bill, where's the best place for people to go to keep up with what you are doing?
Go to our website, catholicleague.org, www.catholicleague.org. You'll find a wealth of information. You'll find you can click on there and order the book very quickly. It's selling very, very well. It's only 1 day old. And thanks to people like you and David Horowitz, it will reach an even bigger audience.
Bill Donohue, thanks so much for coming back to the Right Take podcast. Keep up the great work, sir.
Thank you so much.
Listeners, I highly recommend Bill Donohue's new book, Cultural Meltdown, and go to catholicleague.org to subscribe to his editorials, too. They're short and insightful commentaries about the state of the culture. And thank you for joining me here at the intersection of politics and culture. Don't forget to subscribe to The Right Take so that you can keep up with all the important conversations we're having here. And if you like what you hear, please leave that positive review. Be seeing you. The Right Take with Mark Tapson is a project of the David Horowitz Freedom Center and Front Page Magazine. Unauthorized reproduction of this podcast without express written consent is prohibited.